let's go. Thank you for everyone for being here. We are going to talk about what we can build with a Lightning Web Component open source. So my name is Fabien Taillon. As you can hear, I'm French. I'm 7-time Salesforce MVP. I'm also CTO at Texay, which is a French consulting company. I'm also the Paris Developer Group leader. And I'm also part of the team that is bringing French Touch Dreaming, which is the same kind of event as London's Calling, but in Paris. This year will be in December 1st. So if you want to join us, tickets are already on sale. I'm a serial speaker, so I speak to a lot of events because I like it. And not so serial blogger because I like to start blog, but I never finish them. I think I post half of the blog I start writing. So this is my Twitter handle, so you can follow me or ask me a question later if you have questions about this talk. And our blog at Texay is there. So here is the agenda. So it's basically what is open source at Salesforce. Some of the stuff are not really open source, but can be used. What you can do with it, we'll show you how we can build something with Lightning Web Runtime. I'll explain what it is if you don't know. Yeah, we'll have a small demo, and then I will explain what you can do with one component that you could potentially reuse on the Salesforce platform and on like outside of the platform, like Heroku, for instance. So what is open source at Salesforce? So actually, there are lots of things. There is a whole site dedicated to open source project at Salesforce. So obviously, there are Lightning Web Components. So even if you work with VS Code, all the extensions you are using to develop your own code are open source, so you can see how they build and even make pull requests, ask for stuff. Everything is on GitHub. There is SLDS, so Lightning Design System, Oakleaf, which is a tool to build CLIs and other stuff. You can go to the website, there are lots of things in there. And it's not very new because previously Aura was already open source, so it's quite a long history of open source project for Salesforce. Not all of them have the same kind level of open sourceness, if you can say that. For instance, LWC and extension for VS Code, they are really developed in an open source project, which is you can go to GitHub and see all the pull requests, all the issues, all the commands the developers are doing while developing the tools. Whereas, for instance, SLDS is basically they are doing it internally, and at every release they are publishing on GitHub as an open source project the latest source. But you don't see the internal discussion or internal building of the project itself. So there are some other stuff that are not open source, but still can be used outside of Salesforce. So you have some packages that you can use to build your own application. So for instance, Lightning Web Runtime, which is I will talk about it later, but a runtime to run your application. It's not open source. You can go to GitHub and see the project is private. Still, you can use the project for your own application. Lightning Base Components too. It's not really open source, but there is an NPM package you can install and get outside of the platform all the base components, most of them, that you have on the Salesforce platform. So what you can do? Well, you can use everything we just talked about, which is Lightning Web Runtime, LWC, SLDS, and base component. But not only, for instance, so if you are used to building LWC on Salesforce, you may know the @wire tag, which lets you call API, and this Lightning Data Service will let you cache your call. So let's say you will call a web service, REST API. If you refresh your page, it won't call it again. It will use the local cache to be sure you won't need to call again some APIs for nothing. There is something like a 15 minutes cache. So you can build custom @wire on Salesforce, but outside of Salesforce, you can create your own. You can use a Lightning navigation service that's used on Salesforce platform, but also outside of Salesforce. And there are some stuff that are either open source first or only. For instance, LightDOM that is coming to the platform this release has been on the open source version for a few months already. And dynamic component creation, this is possible on outside of the platform with LWC, but you can't do it on the platform, which is creating a component on the fly, giving the name of the component you want to create. And then you can use any tool of your choice. So there was a talk this morning about TypeScript, for instance. It's your own project that you build locally, so you can use whatever tool you would like to build or to package or even TypeScript or whatever. So it's really up to you. So let's see what we can do with the Lightning Web Runtime. So what is Lightning Web Runtime? So it's a new runtime that was built with performance in mind. So you already can use it when you create a new community, so Experience Cloud now. When you go to Experience Cloud in Salesforce, when you create a new community, new experience, you can select different templates, and one of them is build your own LWR, which is Lightning Web Runtime. So what's the difference between this one and there is exactly the same without the LWR? It's just that the old one is using Aura, so everything like Lightning Experience. And LWR is a new runtime made from scratch. So it's 100% LWC, no Aura at all. What does it mean? The idea is to get some application that can load in less than 1 second. And when you use Aura, just to load the framework itself, before starting to load any of your custom code, it already takes more than 1 second. So it's just not possible to have super fast application or website. So LWR is a 100% new runtime that will let you build and launch applications that are super fast. The drawback is that, as you may know, when you create LWC, you can't put an Aura component inside, which means that in all your LWR Experience Cloud site, you won't be able to use existing standard Aura components. So the existing list of components is much smaller. So we will focus on what we can do outside of Salesforce. So you will be able to use this runtime outside of Salesforce, even though it's the same runtime as you use in Experience Cloud. You will be able to configure like module services, like navigation service that is not there by default. You need to import some stuff depending on what you need. And there is a file that is called lwr.config.json that lets you configure everything you want, what you need to import, your routes, everything. We'll see a little bit later. So it's very easy to start. You just need to run this command, npm init LWR. So there is a whole documentation about this documentation. So there is two documentation. One documentation for LWR on the platform, so Experience Cloud, and another one that is for all your outside platform project, so Heroku, AWS, you name it. So this is the documentation for the LWR outside of Salesforce. So if you want to create a website, you just need to, or an application, you just need to run this command, npm init LWR. It will ask you a few questions like what's the name of the project, is it a static page or a single page application, TypeScript or JavaScript, etc. Just answer the question, it will create an application for you that you just have to run, and it will be like a hello world page. So after that, I have a few slides that explain how you can, what you need to do to set up everything, like base component, etc. Maybe I will go a little bit faster on this slide. The idea is so that when I will publish a slide after the session, if you're interested, you can go to the slide and see, okay, this is what he did to include base component, this is what he did to include SLDS extra. I will show you, but a little bit faster than I should maybe. So let's see. When you start your own project, first you need to add SLDS, so Lightning Design System, because it's not part of the project. So we just need to install it the same way with the npm package, and then copy the script that was downloaded as a node module inside your asset folder, so part of your website. You can script it if you don't want to do it manually, of course. And then you need to create a HTML page that will be sort of your main application, and add a style sheet link so that your styles are loaded by your application, like you would do in any regular HTML page. So the documentation is there. And if you do this, you will get SLDS working for your application. Okay, one other thing is that, so if you're familiar with LWC, you know LWC, when you create your own LWC, there is something that is called shadow DOM that will prevent CSS styles to get inside your component. So if you create a component with like a button, lightning button, for instance, you won't be able to, if you load your SLDS style globally on your page, it won't style your button because the shadow DOM of your LWC is preventing the style from leaking inside. So this is on purpose with shadow DOM, but to use SLDS, you need to have a way to work around this. And the way to do it is to use synthetic shadow DOM, which is used on the Salesforce platform. But on LWR, you need to say to the runtime, I want to use synthetic shadow DOM. So this is quite easy when you know how to do it. You just go to lwr.config.json. You set to the bundle config that you want to use it, and you, for each page you want to use, you will just say use it, so true, false. And this will allow you to use SLDS in your own component. But if you don't use SLDS and you have your own style, you may not need this. So then after this, you will need to add also Lightning-based components, so everything you know on the Salesforce platform, like Lightning button, Lightning card, etc. And so you will say to, also you will configure the file to say use these base components. So this is the single line. Well, I didn't, yeah, first you need to install it, npm install Lightning base components. So this will download on your computer all the base components from Salesforce that are available outside of the Salesforce platform. And once you add this in your file, you will be able to use them in your LWC as you do on Salesforce. Another thing you will need to do is to configure server-side routing. So the idea is you will have two things. It's a single, let's say you are building a single page application outside of Salesforce. You will need to say, okay, this is my page 1, this is my page 2, and when I navigate, this is the name of the page. So you have two things to do. First, define it on the server side. So if I go to myapp.com/page1, server side needs to know which component you will render. So this is the way you do it. You will just say, okay, for all paths coming to my application on the server, just go to my C apps, it's my component, inside the main.html. And on client-side routing, it's a little bit more complicated, not that much. You will define an object, which is the routes that is there, where you will say, okay, if someone came to the home page, just run the home page handler. If you go to the name page, which will be whatever name you want, just run the name page handler. And then you will just have to write some code to say, okay, if someone types user detail in the URL, just load the component that is named user detail. So for here, it's just basic name, but you could route whatever you would like. So it's pretty easy to do. And then we need to add to your main template the LWR router container, which is the component that will handle all navigation for you. So that's it for navigation. And if you want to create a custom attire, that's pretty easy too. So it's basically just an ES6 module, and you have some functions you need to define, like a connect, disconnect, update, etc. And you see this is a working one. It's a pretty basic one, but I have an endpoint at the top. And then in the update, I'm just fetching the endpoint and returning the JSON object that was called. And that's almost it. And what it does, it will work the exact same way as what we have in Salesforce, which is you will load your page the first time, call the API, return the object, display it, refresh the page. It's still less than 15 minutes. It won't call the API again. It will use the local cache for you. So you are using the exact same mechanism as Salesforce is using, just by defining a module like that. So it's pretty neat, which can be done on the Salesforce platform, unfortunately. And there is documentation right here on how to do it. Okay, so I will show you what can be done. So what I did is I built a few components. So everything I have two repositories that I will share with you after. I built two applications. The idea was to create the same components and to try to deploy them both on, here it's Heroku, and also on Experience Cloud, and try to see if I can have the same application with the same components. So here is the application that is on Heroku. So as you can see, even though it's not on Salesforce and it's on Heroku, you can recognize the look and feel of Salesforce. So this is the base component. This is lightning icon. This is lightning card. This is lightning, I don't remember the name, but I can see in the code. Well, let's see the demo first. So it's a pretty basic component. I will click there, navigate, come back. As you can see, it's pretty straightforward. But you can see every time I click the URL, it's changing also. There is a record ID that is passed. Same thing as in Salesforce, sort of. And I did the same thing in Experience Cloud. So if you go to Experience Cloud, it is the same component. It's behaving the same way. So as you can see, it was a little bit slower the first time because it was doing the API call, and next time it's pretty fast because it's using wire actually. So you can see that I built a component once with Lightning-based component and SLDS, and I was able to deploy it both on the Salesforce platform and on any other outside of Salesforce project. Could be on Heroku, on AWS, on Amazon, whatever on Azure. I mean, it's up to you. It's a little bit different in terms of look and feel. Why? It's just because that when you create an Experience Cloud website, there are some theme information. So by default, Experience Cloud is setting like font size, background color, etc. So if I would like to get the exact same look and feel, I would need to go in Experience Cloud and say, I want this specific font size, this specific font, this specific color, and I would get the exact same result. Let's say that the default value for LWR outside of Salesforce and on Experience Cloud are a little bit different, but as you can see, the result is almost identical. So I will share with you, but you have two repositories, one for LWC open source with Lightning Web Runtime. So you can see the link to the Heroku app I just showed you. So it's running a free Heroku account. Sometimes it takes a few minutes to load if you go to the app later. And the link to the other project, which is the one on the Salesforce platform. So if you are used to SFDX, it's just a regular SFDX project. You can create a scratch org, deploy everything, and you will get the same result. And there is also the link with the application I just showed you on Experience Cloud, so you can compare. So if I go back to my slides, so truth is not that simple. I mean, it's not a 100% component. It's an identical component that you can deploy on both platforms because there are some differences that you need to be aware of. So of course, there are some resources that are only available on Salesforce. So let's say you have a component that call an Apex class, that call a static resource, for instance. So if I want to add an image, when I'm on Salesforce, I need to add it as a static resource, import it like this with the Salesforce/resource URL. And on OSS, you will just copy paste it in your asset folder, and that's it. So it's a little bit different in the way you import your file in your component. Custom at wire, as I said, it's pretty cool, but you can only use it outside of Salesforce. But as you can see, what I did is almost the same. This is on the OSS project. I'm importing a class, the one that I show you, directly from my own local file system, like this. And on Salesforce, I had to recreate an Apex class that was doing the same thing. But except the fact that I had to create the Apex class, I just replaced this line by this line, and it's pretty the same thing after that. But you need to have it in mind if you want to reuse the component in different places. Navigation is working fine, so you can use navigation service, so navigation mixing, etc. in both of your components. It's working on Salesforce, but also on the OSS version. The only thing is that when I created my component for the demo, I was like, oh, okay, I will name my page like a name page. Okay, that's cool, that works, because I can set the name I want, but on Salesforce, you can't really set the name you want. Salesforce is expecting, for instance, in community, the page tab should be a com name page. And if you are in Lightning Experience, it's another type of name. So you need to be careful about that if you need to reuse the component in several places, because the page name expected by Salesforce are specific, whereas on OSS, you can do whatever you want. But if I have done it the other way around, I could have named, instead of name page, I could have named it in my open source version like this, and it would have worked on the two projects. Just I didn't thought about it when I created the demo. So I let it like this to remember that it may be an issue. And then there is the metadata file. So if you are on Salesforce, you know that you need to have a JS file that will say what is the API version, where the component is available, like in Experience or Experience Cloud, etc. If you don't have it, you won't be able to deploy. The other way around is that I tried to add it on the OSS project and it just doesn't care. So I guess you can create the file and share it also with LWR on your open source project. It will just work. It will just don't bother. So what we need to, well, know seeing this is that not 100% of your component can be reused as is. So if it's like a presentational component, you pass a list of information, it just display it, it will work fine. There is no interaction, nothing to load. It will be perfect for a component that will be splitted in several projects. So you can't import Salesforce stuff like static resources. Navigation is working fine if you think about it when you develop it at first to get the correct name. And so yeah, it won't fit for all components. So I have a few resources. So LWC with both documentation and repo, Lightning Web Runtime, SLDS. And this is the two repository I show you. So you can see the code and see how it works. And another demo from Aditya to show how you can create dynamic component on OSS, which you can do on the Salesforce platform. And that's it. So I'm almost on time, but if you have some question, I'll be happy to answer them, yeah?
So, maybe it's a stupid question.
There is no stupid question.
Why would you use this rather than React or Vue or Node.js?
Yeah, that's a good question. The answer is there is no reason if you have React developer, but if you are, let's say, if I need to build a tool for my company, we are a Salesforce consulting company. I don't think anyone knows React. So I can say to them, we need to build an app for our own internal system. You know LWC, you can use LWC. But if you are a React developer, I don't think you have any reason to use it.
Performance-wise or design system, how would you compare it?
Compare this to other system?
Performance-wise, how would you compare it to React?
I don't know. I think LWR was built with performance in mind, so I don't think you will have any issue about performance with LWC. It's more like the resources you have. Like if you have a LWC only developer, maybe it could be useful for you. If you have other teams already developing stuff with React, there is no reason to move to LWC. Any other question? Yeah? Say again? Yeah, so, yeah, let's say I have 1 more minute maybe. If I show you the code, maybe it's not really, can you see? When I go to server-side routing here, I just have a /* to say everything needs to pass to this component that will do the routing for us. If you don't do this, when I navigate here, you see the URL change. If I have just / and not the star, it will try to find what is the server-side route for user detail and say, I don't know what it is, and it will just crash. So there is one way to navigate on the client side. It will handle for you the URL change and everything, history. But if you don't also define it with a star on the server side, it's when you refresh, or if I send you the link, you click, it will say, I just know the /URL, I don't know what you are talking about. So, but it's pretty easy because if you just have to, because usually you use only the same routing on server side than on client side. So we just use the star and use the same routing on client side, and it will handle it for you. So this is all the source code that you can find on GitHub. So I will share the slide after, so you can have a look deeper, and feel free to reach out to me if you have any question later on Twitter. Thank you.